Welcome to the Extra on KRDO News Radio, the show that connects you with the topics and issues and people that are important to you. And very important person here, Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. Great to see you, Catherine.
So good to be back, Renee.
I know. I haven't seen you in a little bit. You had a nice little vacation, yes?
I did.
Good for you. You've been so busy. And today we are going to talk about emergency preparedness. You know, we've been talking about it in terms of, getting your house ready and getting this stuff ready. But there's also other stuff to being prepared legally.
There is, and most of us don't think about those things.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And a lot of this was, some of what we're going to talk about, and we need to reinforce this, is if something happens to your child in an emergency.
Absolutely.
And this was all triggered. I did not realize this, but your office is located next to Coronado High School.
Exactly.
And then we know as last week there was that emergency active shooter.
Right.
It was not real, but you guys saw everything that happened because of that call.
We did. We happened to be just exiting the office when everything started happening, when the police and firefighters and all were coming in and staging. And we were going out for an event, and I pulled over to check and see what was happening, and it wasn't updated on KRDO yet, which of course is where I go to check on
Right,
things.
absolutely.
And so once I got where I was going, I looked it up and saw that they thought there was an active shooter. And it reminded me how close this stuff is to all of us.
Yeah.
And it just was, I don't even remember, just within the last few years that the Planned Parenthood shooting happened right around the corner from us. My daughter was at New Life Church minutes before the shooter there years ago. We used to go to the theater in Aurora. I grew up in Lakewood, close to Columbine. So it's been all around me. And we also happen to be the place that people come to when there is some sort of a crisis and somebody is injured and disabled or passes away. And so we get to see the inside of all of what happens when something like this occurs.
And the great thing about today is we are going to give tips to help people be prepared in case, and nobody wants to think,
right,
it's not going to happen to me.
Right.
But it can happen to anybody, any age, anywhere.
Exactly. And it might be something like a shooting, God forbid, or it might be a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many people I've talked to just in the last couple of months who were injured by other people and debilitated, driving innocently down the road. There are people who die all the time driving innocently down the road. Life happens. We have accidents of other sorts. Life happens. What is it that we need to do in order to be prepared from a legal standpoint for those things? Because today our society is complicated enough that legal preparations are important.
So let's hop in and let's start with, and we have covered this before, but I think it's, sometimes for parents, they forget or they don't even think about it. If something happens to your child, and there's a difference between if your child is 18 or under 18 or 18 or older, there's big things can change if your child is hurt.
Exactly. And so if your child is under age 18, you as a parent can still take care of everything that's necessary, make all medical decisions, of course, talk to the doctors and get medical information. But the day that your child turns 18, the entire world changes from a legal perspective. And so one of the big places that it changes, a lot of parents find this out when child goes away to college at age 18, and they call the college wanting to find out about their child's grades or something like that, or talk about the financial side of things, financial aid, et cetera. And they're told by the college or university that they can't get any information because their child is now legally adult.
Right. And
that's a surprise. And so it comes into play in terms of dealing with things like that, which of course become an issue if your child is injured and now they can't pay their bills, they can't shut off the cable if they're injured and need to move back in with you or whatever else happens. So from a legal perspective, there are some simple documents that you need as a parent in order to be able to take care of those things for a child on a practical level, and that would be a financial power of attorney.
Okay.
So once your child turns 18, financial power of attorney is what would enable you to take care of arrangements, talk to people, pay bills, turn off the cable, do whatever needs to be done in that kind of situation. The other, and sometimes more pressing need that parents can feel is from a medical perspective.
Right.
If something happens to my child, if my child is the one who's in a motorcycle accident, in a car accident, or again, God forbid, in some sort of a shooting incident.
Right.
In order for me to call the hospital and find out whether or not my child is there and whether or not my child is okay from a legal perspective, you now have to have specific previously written authorization from your child in order to be able to make that call easily.
So, and that's a specific form that has to be filled out?
It is, and it's called a universal HIPAA release. So most of us, when we go to the doctor, they have us sign a HIPAA release form that says, for this visit, for this doctor, it's okay for you to talk to the following people about me, and it's okay for you to leave a message on this number and say XYZ, but not, ABC, all those kinds of things. So we sign a HIPAA release when we go to the doctor. We sign a HIPAA release when we go to the hospital. But those are only for those providers for those specific incidents.
Right.
So if you want to be able to find out if your child is okay or not, if some sort of other thing happens to them out in the world, you need to have specific written authorization in the form of a universal HIPAA release, meaning it applies to all medical providers at all times for all issues. You need to have that in advance, and you need to have access to that. It's a
so
very
like a
simple
copy
form.
of it. Okay.
Exactly. Very, very simple form that says the following people always have a right to my medical information.
Okay. And that will help parents again in the event. Remember, as soon as your child turns 18, you lose the right to a lot of information.
And I have lots and lots of parents who've come in and told me the story of when their child was in a car accident or some other thing happened, and they called the hospital to find out whether their child was okay or not, and the hospital said, we can't tell you whether or not Joe is here.
Yeah, so get prepared for that. And when we come back, other things you need to do to be prepared in case of an emergency legally. We've got more with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, next on the Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to the Extra on KRDO News Radio. Today we're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, talking about being prepared for emergencies. And this is in the legal aspect, being prepared for any possibility legally. I just want to bring up really quick, Mike came down and he brought up a very good point about the universal HIPAA thing, right?
Yes.
And he goes, well, if my son, though, as my child is on my insurance until they're 25, how is it I don't have access to their information?
Exactly.
If they are hospitalized.
And can't I just say, well, fine, if you won't give me the information, I'm not going to have my insurance cover the cost.
Right.
Without getting paid. But it doesn't quite work that way. And it all comes down to our greedy, litigious society. And they're legitimately afraid of being sued for any dumb little thing because we live in a society where people have learned you can make money by filing lawsuits. They don't even have to be based in fact.
So that's why let's get the universal HIPAA and sign it and just cover yourself.
Exactly.
And then you can get the information.
For every member of your family who is age 18 or over.
Sounds perfect. Okay, let's move on now to being prepared. Should we talk about fire?
Sure.
Fire. So this is house fires. It's that season. So we know we've been talking about mitigation for houses and all this stuff and, preparing your house for wildfire season.
Right.
But there's also legally things you need to do as well to be prepared.
Yes. And one of the things to do is to have all of your important information together so that if there's any kind of an emergency event, you have one place to go to get all of the relevant information. That would be obviously your legal documents, if you have any estate planning documents, but also things that relate to all of your assets, your account numbers, etc., and your insurance policies. Have those all together in one place. Our clients who've been through the Waldo Canyon fire and the Black Forest fire, whether or not they lost their home, they've had the most the most peace of mind through the experience from a practical perspective when they had their documents together. They had one place to go so that if they had an opportunity to evacuate anything, they were able to go maybe into their safe, maybe into their filing cabinet, get that one set of documents that contained the master of everything that they might need if there was some sort of emergency and if they end up losing their home, and then evacuate. And it's important to remember that a fireproof safe is not typically going to survive. I don't know of any that actually survive a wildfire.
Because the temperature is so hot, isn't it?
Yes. And so it's good to have copies of those documents elsewhere.
Like in a safety deposit box or...
Exactly.
Okay.
Or scanned in and held in a cloud somewhere, someplace else that they can be accessed if your home and your fireproof safe go down in a fire.
And again, it's just having everything from, like you said, account information to even passwords, right? I bet one of the biggest things that clients run into is, well, I can access this information for this person, right?
Right.
So I'm sure keeping a master list but safe, obviously, of knowing how to access certain things is critical.
And there are great apps on your phone these days that will keep all of your passwords locked up inside of your phone.
I did not even know that.
Yeah.
See, I need to go check that out. Okay, let's talk about accidents and injuries and also being prepared for that as well.
Perfect.
So what are some of the things we need to know about that?
So there are all kinds of accidents and things that can happen to us as adults. It might be a car accident. It might be a hiking or skiing accident. It might be some, traumatic public hazard type event like a shooting. When those things happen, there are some short-term, immediate legal needs that we have. And one of those is, again, the HIPAA release. For everybody over age 18, if my spouse or my children or my parents or anybody else that I want to be able to call the hospital and find out whether or not I'm there, what room number I'm in, I need to have that universal HIPAA release signed that says it's okay for them to get my basic medical information. So in addition, if I am injured in any way, let's say it's just temporarily, and I can't pay my own bills, I can't take care of, even paying the cable company or doing whatever other little thing like that might need to be done, pay my mortgage. What I need is a financial power of attorney for somebody to be able to step in and take care of that. Now, a financial power of attorney is an imperfect document. First of all, it has to be really comprehensive, and it has to very specifically list everything that I want somebody else to be able to do.
Right.
In addition to that, it's not typically going to be accepted by important institutions like banks, or if my house needs to be sold, by the title company. It's not going to be accepted for a long time after I sign it. So it's a very temporary document. I wouldn't rely on it for any kind of a long-term disability. But a financial power of attorney would be helpful. And then a healthcare power of attorney saying this person can make medical decisions for me if there's a short time that I can't communicate those. And then a living will saying how I feel about artificial life support if I have a terminal condition and I'm comatose or unconscious.
So let's take a quick break. We have to take a news break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that more, and then long-term needs as well. If, say, you're injured or someone in your family is injured. We'll talk more with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, next on The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Today we're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, helping you be prepared for emergencies in the legal aspect. And Catherine, I know a lot of these topics we could go very in-depth into, but we were also on time constraints. And it's like, okay, we were talking about the financial power of attorney, and like that only lasts for like a year. Like you're saying, some financial institutions after a year will be like, nope. Can't accept that.
Exactly.
So there's lots of stuff to understand and know. And again, we're just scratching on the surface. But that's why you guys have workshops that come up, and we'll talk about that to be prepared. But we were talking about, okay, say an adult was injured, and in several instances, it could be an accident. It could be, there are numerous ways somebody become hurt. And we kind of talked about what you need for the short term.
Exactly.
To help that person, but also we need to talk about long-term needs now.
Yes. So if you're injured and the injury lasts more than a month or two and you're not able to take care of yourself for a longer period of time, we have those same issues, but the ways to address them might become a little bit different. As far as the financial issues go, if I'm injured for the long term, a financial power of attorney, because of the limited nature of its use, because most institutions will only accept it for a short time after you signed it, and because there are a lot of institutions that will only accept a power of attorney if it's on their own form, if I'm incapacitated for a long period of time, the power of attorney may not do everything that I need it to do over the rest of my life.
Right.
And so that's where people start considering a revocable living trust as the right kind of tool, because a revocable living trust, it's just an empty theoretical box, and we put all of our assets into this theoretical box, like my own personal treasure chest. And so I put my house in there and my bank accounts and my investments, and then I go on with my life, and I still own everything because I'm the manager or trustee of my trust.
Right.
But if I become incapacitated, whoever I've named as successor trustee doesn't have to worry about a power of attorney being accepted. Whoever I've named as successor trustee just steps in, and they have full authority to take care of everything, and institutions can't say, well, no, we don't like that, it's too old.
Because it's in that living trust.
Exactly.
So and what are they called? A backup trustee? I know that's not the right word, but a backup trustee, a successor trustee. So if you become incapacitated, they can take over.
They just step in. Yeah.
Perfect. So it's a great alternative or a long-term after the financial. And is that for healthcare as well, or is that strictly financial?
That's strictly financial.
Okay.
It just relates to our assets, and it only takes care of the assets that we've actually transferred into the trust. So the whole key with a trust, as people who know anything about a trust should know, the whole key is having all of your assets in the trust except for your retirement plans, so that we can take care of things if you're not able to.
And does this lead to, and I know we've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating, conservatorship and guardianship. Does it lead into that, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if I'm injured in some sort of an accident and I don't have the right documents in place, and let's say my house eventually needs to be sold and I need to move into a retirement community, or I need to move in with my parents to take care of me, or whatever the situation might be. If I don't have the right documents in place for somebody to be able to take care of absolutely everything from a legal perspective, that's when typically we set up a conservatorship and or guardianship so that somebody else has the legal right to take care of those things. But setting up a conservatorship means I have to disclose all of my personal information, typically through a lawyer, to a judge.
Right.
The judge then decides who's going to be in charge of managing my affairs. The judge approves a budget. We have to outline a budget for every single dollar that comes in and every single dollar that's going to be spent. And from now on, my conservator has to live by that budget.
Yeah, there's no straying from it.
Exactly. Even if I'm married and I have a spouse who's perfectly healthy and capable, they still have to live by the budget for my share of the assets. And get the court's approval. So it's an annual stamp of approval from the court. We have to file annual accountings, and it's a real pain in the neck. My spouse has to ask for permission before they sell the house or make this investment or do things that they normally would be able to do.
And everything has to be approved by the judge.
Exactly. So it's expensive and really intrusive.
Now let's talk about the medical aspect of it, end-of-life decisions for the long-term care. There's things that you can also do to help with that. And is a living will one of them? Is it called the living will?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there are variations on advanced medical directives in every different state. Healthcare power of attorney typically is the document that names somebody to make your medical decisions if you can't communicate those. Living will is part of the document set that outlines, and it's different in every state. We just updated our laws a couple of years ago in Colorado. It basically addresses end-of-life decisions and issues related to if I have a pretty debilitating situation and am never again able to care for myself.
Right.
One of the most important things, even if you have named somebody to make your medical decisions, and you've expressed some of your basic wishes. Like most people say, if I have a terminal condition, I've been in a coma for at least a week, there's no hope that I would ever recover. You don't need to keep me on artificial life support forever. Let me go.
Right.
However, most situations that somebody might have to make a decision about don't fit into that nice, neat little box. It's going to be some variation on that. And so we talk about having the conversation with your family, which is just sitting down and talking about what makes life meaningful to you, so that whatever kind of decision they have to make, whatever treatment or surgery or other thing that the doctors propose, if I'm not able to communicate my own wishes, the person that I put in charge of making my decisions is going to be confident that whatever decision they make about whether to pursue that kind of treatment or not is what I would want.
And it just protects everybody.
Exactly.
And makes it easier for the person making the decision.
So much easier at a time that's already really heart-wrenching.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to have to take a quick break, and we come back. More tips on being prepared in an emergency with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group on the Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to the Extra on KRDO News Radio. And today we're talking about emergency preparedness with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. And there's so many aspects of being prepared for an emergency. And a lot of times we forget legally we need to be prepared. We need to have certain documents in place and in a certain place and everything ready just in case of an emergency. And one thing we need to talk about is medical. Like say someone has been diagnosed with a disease or has a stroke.
Yes.
Or some type of medical incident where they cannot speak for themselves. Does a lot of what we talked about before kind of apply to this as well?
It does. And it's exactly the same kinds of principles. And it's helpful to think through that, again, we think of these things happening only to people who are older. Heart attack, stroke, dementia, the flu.
Right.
But there are people who, young, otherwise really healthy people who died of the flu this year.
I mean, from kids
right
to 30-year-olds
right
to 50-year-olds.
Exactly. Yeah. None of us is immune to this. I personally know a number of people who've died of heart issues under age 50 that never had any sort of indication that there was a problem. Life happens. Dementia, it's happening to people in their 40s.
Isn't that scary?
Yeah, like regularly happening to people in their 40s. So we all need to be thinking about these things. Same thing, short-term immediate needs, both medical, the same HIPAA release and healthcare power of attorney, living will. And then on the financial side of things, financial power of attorney and or revocable living trust.
But then don't you kind of get into some money management stuff? Say it is a long-term, say someone does have a stroke. And they are incapable of, obviously taking care of themselves.
Right.
Don't we get into some money management, financial things there as well?
Absolutely, we do. And so that's where financial power of attorney is better than nothing. But if you have something that lasts for a long time and you stay alive, typically that's not going to carry you. Particularly if you own real estate, you need a revocable living trust.
Okay.
Typically. In order to stay out of the legal system and having lawyers and judges decide everything for you.
It can, and I know I'm saying this because you get to deal with this every day, Catherine, and you understand it, but it can get very complicated, can it?
It's complicated, it's intrusive, it's stressful.
And
it's really hard on families who are already going through hard things.
Well, and anybody who's gone through it knows, you and I were just talking about, my situation that happened 16 years ago, and we just finally wrapped up some court stuff with it.
Right.
And
holy cow, and that's not unusual.
Right. And it's like, okay, that one piece 16 years later is now done. Yeah. We are now done with all the court stuff from something that happened, 16 years ago. So it can take a long, long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just fighting that takes years and years and years.
Yeah.
Within a family, and the whole family.
Yeah, that's just it. Emotions get in play.
Each other again.
Exactly.
Yes. And then if we pass away from the accident or illness, whatever it might be, then it's that whole separate set of issues. There's how do we empower somebody? Helpful for people to know, if you own real estate, that's not just going to pass to your loved ones without passing through the probate court first. And that's a good 9 to 24 months. That's going to take typically some money, and it's more than people expect, and it's a hassle. So important to plan for if you pass away as well.
And the great thing is you guys offer workshops, and we still had a lot to talk about, which we didn't touch on, but if we need to carry it over, we obviously can. But you have workshops that it's basically where to start, right, in planning and being prepared.
Exactly.
And
so it's, really just general information about planning for incapacity and death, and planning around all of the real life issues in our complicated world. So
Right.
we haven't talked about most of the other factors that people are worried about at disability and death, just the basics.
I know, and we were still we had so much to cover. We can carry it over next time if we need to.
Okay.
But the upcoming workshops, this is like the beginnings, right?
Yes.
So when are they happening?
Yeah, so we just had workshops last week. Our next set of workshops is coming up on Wednesday, May 2nd. We have one at 2:30 in the afternoon and 6:30 in the evening, and then Saturday, May 5th at 10 o'clock in the morning. And those are in the south and central parts of town.
And they need to register ahead of time.
Please register ahead of time so we can make sure that there is space for you. We've had workshops really filling up this year. We've had to cut off registrations and make people wait for another month to come. So you can go online to coloradoestateplan.com.
Okay.
Or call our office at 719-520-1474, and we can get you on the list so you can make sure you get a spot.
So register now is what you're saying
today,
for the
yes.
May 2nd and the May 5th workshops.
Yes.
Catherine, it's always great talking. And again, we did not get to half of what we were going to talk about. There's so much to cover.
We'll come back to it. Yep.
Absolutely. Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And then coming up tomorrow on The Extra, going to have a little bit of fun, a big event happening at the World Arena. It's the 23rd Annual Pikes Peak Food, Wine, and Beer Expo. We'll have Chef BB, Supanza Banker, and Brother Luck here on The Extra on KRDO News Radio.